Welcome back to Knit a Spell, everyone. I'm your host, Katie Rempe, and today I have a guest and fellow podcaster, Kim Davis. Dur, dur, dur.
Yay! Hello. Thank you so much for having me, Katie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for coming on. So, for those who don't know, Kim is a lifelong New Yorker, jealous, a social worker, and a true crime enthusiast. Kim channels her passion for understanding humanity's darkest corners into co hosting her own true crime podcast, Slaycation, where she researches and
Yes.
shares cases alongside her husband and best friend. Kim is also a crafter. And since so many folks here in the fiber world seem to also love the true crime genre, I thought this would be a perfect time for us to chat together, share the connections between storytelling, creativity, and of course, staying adaptable between crafting and research. So let's get into it. Light from Lantern presents Knit a Spell. I'm your host, Katie Rempe, designer, knit witch, and your companion in this magical making podcast. Together, let's explore the enchanted world where knitting meets the magic of the craft. So, what drew you to true crime, and how did that lead to Slaycation coming about?
Well, I'll tell you, Katie, the interesting thing about true crime for me is that I am the OG of true crime. I was all about true crime before DNA was, you know, locating people. It was me reading all the crime books and just being fascinated by it. In fact, my husband will say that on our first date, he had come to my house and he had noted the library of just true crime nonfiction. And you got to realize it was a time before the 24-hour true crime porn of Discovery ID and before DNA would identify Gary Ridgway as the Green River Killer. So it was way back, way back.
Wow.
So it
We
was
have you to
always
thank for it.
something. Yes, I would say I paved the way, but it was something that I was always captivated by. And I attribute some of that to my crazy upbringing. My parents, my father in particular, he was crazy. And so everybody was crazy. And so a big part of my childhood was being taught to be fearful of the world, look at everybody as if they're a serial killer.
Oh,
you
comforting.
know,
Cool. Yeah.
yeah, it was like, not allowed to go out, not allowed to go out with friends. So it just kind of, I guess, in a sense, while it was damaging in a certain way, but it also raised it awoken in me this certain insightfulness, like, okay, what is going on? What are people really like? Not everybody can be a serial killer, but let's take a look at those that are. What is going on there? So
Mm.
that sort of was I guess you could say, my foray into that world. So it was kind of a lifetime of just consuming that content, reading books, watching documentaries, and it just was a very big interest of mine. And
Oh.
so the podcast came about really because, my husband, he has a few podcasts and he and I were talking, and there was a idea he had for a show, for a television show. And he was talking to me about it. And the TV show was also called Slaycation, and he was saying, oh, and it's a take on murders and mysterious deaths and disappearances while on vacation. And then I just happened to recount a couple that I happen to know off the top of my head, and he was like, oh, this could be a podcast and you should
Mm.
host it. And I was like, no. No. But he somehow managed to convince me, and here we are, about a year and a half later in.
And do you do weekly episodes?
Yes,
Ooh.
yes,
Oh
yes.
my.
Yeah, so it's always juggling something. It's like jumping through hoops of fire while juggling hand grenades. You can't stop. You can't stop.
Don't let the bus go under
Exactly.
55 miles per hour.
Exactly. Exactly.
Oh
So
my
that's,
gosh.
yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
what is your process for selecting and researching these cases? I'm upset to know
Well,
there's so many cases of people going on vacation to
it's,
get murdered.
I gotta say, it's kind of crazy to think that there are, because our podcast is very niche in that way. All the cases fit under this umbrella of something that happened while on vacation, something tragic. A lot of times I'll get suggestions, like we have people that will request cases. And I always have friends that are like, did you see this case? Did you see this case? Did you see this case? And I have a spreadsheet of just a list of cases. It's kind of crazy. And, I'll select a case and then I'll just do the deep dive and research the stories through court documents and reading news articles. And if there's time, looking at documentaries, sometimes there's even books. I guess you could say a little compulsive in my research. Like, I need to know everything.
Well,
And
that's a
I
good
need,
quality
it is a
in
good
this case.
quality. It is. It's a very good quality. It is very time consuming because I could always use more time because I like to get a piece of information and then I have to corroborate it several times to make sure that it is as factual as possible. I probably make it so much harder than it needs to be. But I can't help myself. And, so it's really there that I start. And then I just kind of, get all the basic information together and then get all the facts right to the best of my ability, and then try to put it in the form of an interesting, engaging story.
Mm.
I'm not a journalist, but I feel like the facts have to be right. But then, I try to make it as palatable for my audience as possible so that it's something interesting to listen to, not just like hard, dreary facts.
Well, let me just say, it sounds like you are more thorough than the quote actual journalists, news people that we have anymore.
Yeah.
So, thank
Right?
you.
Oh my gosh. Well, you're welcome. I appreciate that. And, a lot of times what'll come up is I'll find that there's information that's conflicting. I'll note that in the podcast if I can.
I can't wait for one day an episode that you break and go into to like open up a case wide and like really solve something. And I mean, you see that all the time with like the
Yes.
documentaries
Yes.
that,
Yes.
why not you, right? Especially if you're so
Exactly.
thorough. So, ooh,
Exactly. You
guys,
never know.
yeah.
And it's interesting too, because sometimes there are updates, and it's like, oh. And so it's an opportunity to revisit that case and do an update. So it's been interesting. It's been a really interesting journey.
Sounds like a good outlet for you, especially considering
Yes.
I saw that your background is in social work. So, especially in the area of domestic violence, ironically enough.
Yes.
So,
Yes. Yes.
how does your background there shape the way that you approach true crime storytelling?
Well, that's interesting. I think you, having worked in the field of social work, your day-to-day acquaintance with people is during their toughest times, their lowest points. Having worked with the population I typically worked with were women with addictions, women with homelessness issues, or the politically correct term these days, unhoused, women taking care of children while in recovery, and women who were fleeing domestic violence situations. So I worked with women who were like in active crises, who were actively fleeing. One of the things that you kind of learn is the unhealthy patterns that people kind of just take on for whatever reason. the signs, the red flags that they ignored. It's really an eye-opening experience. And there's nothing like the experience itself that I found for me was the education. There's nothing to really prepare you except to be in it. The overlap for me is even like while I'm researching a lot of these cases, I'll think, well, that was a red flag. For example, the first case that we did was the case of Tony and Harold Hawthorne. They went for a little getaway for their anniversary. And there were just so many things that like had me just, you know, they got married and immediately he's controlling their finances. And look, every relationship is different. People have arrangements within the context of their marriage about how they want to do things. Some couples are like, I don't want to deal with the money, you do it. But this was very different in that it really felt that he just kind of came and took over. She was a physician, she was an ophthalmologist, had a whole grown ass practice in her home state of Louisiana. She had a very close relationship with her family. And what does this scumbag do? He comes in and makes her relocate, sell her practice, and takes her to Colorado, her and her baby. And it's like, I knew that what she didn't want to do was have her baby and herself being taken away from her family, from who she is close to. But, you're in a marriage and you want to make it work and you want to try to do so. And I say all that to say it was very clear to me that she did not have a voice in that relationship. And it was very clear that he did not want her to have a voice in that relationship. And that was a red flag, okay? That I know if I were her mother and her mother was frightened for her, I would have been very frightened.
Sounds very culty, where it's like
Yes,
remove the ties from your support network, remove your
yes,
ability to have any financial access so that you
yes.
are 100% dependent on this person.
Exactly.
Oh,
Exactly. And then you wonder, do people recognize these
mm.
signs? Do people see it? I mean, one thing that this guy did that I thought was like completely wackadoo, okay, was he had it that when her phone rang, his phone rang. And I got to tell you, if you're trying to listen to my conversation with my mom, what do you think you're going to hear? Because I can tell you, my husband would be in a bored coma listening to that conversation. So it's like, you need that much control?
Right.
Like,
Read a book. Yeah.
thank you. Thank you. But it was very interesting. Again, it's like all these things are just you see it played out in a lot of these cases. And social work is exhausting. So after I had had my daughter, I was like, yeah, I don't know that I can have that. And unfortunately, social work is not known for its great pay.
Oh, yeah, kind of like a teacher. You mean the people who really help people don't like get any credit
Yes,
or payment for it?
exactly.
That's weird.
Exactly. Are you a teacher?
No, but I know plenty. It's
It's
a
not
giving. It's like being a nurse. Like it's all
yeah.
give. And you only have
Exactly.
so many years of being that before it will
Right.
burn you out and rip you
It's
down.
true. It's
Even if you
true.
have
It
the most
really,
positive attitude and the best of the
exactly.
cases, like
Yeah. And the best intentions and the whole, yeah.
you can't save people, especially since, over time you get a knowing for certain patterns and things. But the people are so
Yes.
far in it that they either
Yeah.
feel like they can't do anything, they're unsafe to do it, or they don't recognize it because it's just their life. It must be
Exactly.
so frustrating.
Yes. It really is. One of the things too that you recognize when you work in these types of fields is how beholden you are to the bureaucracy. And that is exhausting. So when I had my daughter, and it was like, all right, what am I going to do? How am I going to reinvent myself? And I ended up just kind of, it's really interesting. So I had a very rudimentary understanding of how to knit. And I was probably, and I wouldn't even say good, I was probably better at crocheting. Like I would say I was a beginner all around, but it was something that I don't know really, I don't even know why, but it was something that I felt like I needed to do. It occurred to me when I was sitting in a parenting group with other mothers and their babies. I realized all they wanted to talk about was their newborn babies and breastfeeding. And I was like, yeah, this probably isn't the place for me because I don't want to talk about that stuff. That's what I'm trying not to talk about. So I came to knitting and crocheting as something for me. And it was like at that point where, in earnest, I was going to do that because it was something I could do on my own. It was something that I didn't need a time set to do it. I could do it when the baby fell asleep. I could do it when she was at preschool. Like it just opened up the door to really just hone in on something that was so unique and mine alone.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the good fortune of a yarn shop opening up not far from me. And I would literally, not knowing what the fuck I was doing, would just go in there and just stand in there. Like, I would just stand there because I was just so taken with the beauty of the fabric and the yarn and the alpaca and the silk and the cashmere. And the woman that owned the shop, she would tease me because she was like, "You're the only one that comes in here and fondles the yarn." Like I would
That's
just
not
go
true.
in
That
and,
can't be true.
oh, right. I'm like, well, you haven't been paying attention then. But it was just, and then suddenly I just started to do it. And I realized, especially like when I look back, I got in there and I was like, I'm going to do this. And I got good. Like I got really good. So I not only then like really got really good at crocheting, but I got really good at knitting. It was, I guess you could say, the best thing that has ever happened to me. I got so good that when she had a woman working there, that when that woman left, I took over her classes. So then I was teaching beginners knitting.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing workshops. I was doing an entrelac workshop. I was doing a like it just expanded. And so I had this whole life immersed in what I loved. And one of the things that I realized when I was teaching, particularly my beginners, I started to say to them that learning to knit and crochet is 10% technique and 90% desire. If you have the desire, you're going to do it. And the thing that I realized was when I was knitting, I didn't even care so much about what I was making. That was how I got to be really good because it was, I have to do this. I don't care. I have to do it. And because of that, I relaxed. I didn't stress. I was able to sort of go back to the work and look at it and go, okay, I was twisting my stitches the whole time. And that's what I was doing. And that's okay. It just isn't different type of fabric now.
Yes.
It was so remarkably meditative that I kind of see it as my form of meditation
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah.
the motion of it, I knit the way other people go to the gym.
You are not the first person to tell me that this is how they got into knitting. I had another
Really?
guest who said when she had her child, it totally took away her identity, and all she was mom to this child, and everything she did
Yes.
was for the kid,
Yes.
and there was not to say nothing to show for it, but like you feed something and like there's nothing, okay, the kid's still alive and that's great, but
Right.
like what about for you? And so
Right.
she started knitting. Oh, and because she loved to read fiction, but she would get so absorbed that she couldn't read while she had to pay attention to this child. And
Right.
so she
Right.
was very responsible and paid attention to the child.
Right.
But the knitting, just like you said, it was her way to feel like she was being productive. It was just for her. It didn't really even matter what she was making. It just was something that she could show for her time that was just for her.
Exactly.
And the fact
So
that
well
you
put.
tapped into the meditation aspect, you clearly are enjoying the process of knitting, which I think is key to the longevity
Oh,
of any craft is embrace the
it
process. If you're
it
just
really
a
is.
product knitter, you're going to burn out. I mean, like it's nice to
Yes.
have the finished product and you should aim to finish things, but like you should
Yeah,
also enjoy
but
the process of the millions of stitches you have to do too.
exactly. And that's, and you hit the nail right on the head. Like if you are a product knitter. And I think when I said to my students, it's 10% technique and 90% desire, I was trying to make that point that you ask yourself what you're in this for. Because if
Yep.
you want to start making beautiful things, that's not going to happen right away.
Yeah,
It's
and the
not.
more you
It's
pay
just not.
attention to what you're making, the quicker the technique will increase.
Exactly.
I also used to
Exactly.
work at a yarn store and I was shocked that most people never paid attention to what they were doing equaling
You're
what was
so
coming
right.
out of it.
You're so right.
Cuz they
You're
would just
so
give
right.
you like I've messed it up, you fix it. And I'd be like,
Exactly.
no, no. Like this weekend in the middle of the night, I'm not going to be there to fix your shit. Like
That's
you,
so
I will
girl,
tell you how to
girl,
do it. And then
girl.
when this happens again, you will feel empowered to do it. That is also
That's
why
right.
you'll never worry about all your stitches falling off your needle because you could just put them
Thank
right
you.
back on.
Exactly. And that's key. When I was teaching the beginners class, I would say to my students that they should try not to rip it back, just to keep going
Smart.
and not to worry about the mistakes. And I said, because what we will do is when you come back, we will do a little segment I call forensic knitting,
Oh.
where we will where we will look at the fabric. And at this point, because I have done it all, right? I
Yep.
could literally look at the garment and know exactly what happened. And that was what I wanted them to start to develop for themselves. If you rip back after every you're not learning anything.
You're really learning how to be a great ripper. But like
Thank you.
sometimes there's easier ways to fix things than just pulling it all out.
Exactly. And here's the thing, too. I know knitting, I know crocheting, I know crafting is in my soul. It's in my soul. It's like part of my identity in a way that I can't even explain. When we were moving, and it was just like, we was coming from a really big space into a small space. My daughter's in Ohio most of the year for school, so it didn't make sense for us to have. So we pared down, and we went from like a huge place to a place that's maybe the third of the size now. And I say all that to say that I was not knitting.
Mm.
Like for the first time in like I don't even know how long I had stopped knitting. Like I didn't have something that I was working on. And I got so cranky and so bitchy. And I didn't understand. I'm like, what is going on? Do I need my medication adjusted? What's happening? When we finally settled in, I was like, okay, I'm gonna pick up this project that I've had like on the needles for a really long time. And the thing was the thing that made this project very challenging was it was a very intricate lace pattern and you had to pay attention to
Mm.
every stitch. You had to focus. And I was like, this is perfect for me right now. It was perfect because it was like coming home again. and giving all my time and my energy to this. Mind you, it's been on the needles for years. I would do just a little because it was just so involved. But I was so happy and revived, and I finished it, and it was the best feeling. And then I realized, like, yeah, you know what? Knitting has become such a form of meditation for me that when I'm not doing it, like those that do meditate in the traditional way, they probably felt as I do when they're not doing it. Like a little crabby, a little short,
Yeah,
everything's getting on your nerves. You don't feel like fucking making dinner tonight.
that's
Can't we
right.
just have
Can't you do it?
Cheerios?
Yeah.
Thank you. Exactly.
You had a fiber deficiency, is what was happening.
That's absolutely correct. It just has been this thing that just continues to evolve in all these really amazing ways. As always something for me to do, something for me to relax. The woman who owned who, she has since closed the shop, but she now has a festival that she does every year called the Kings County Fiber Festival. So I take part in that. I will teach a class or do a workshop or help her out with the administrative stuff like run a spreadsheet. It's just been wonderful to have all of these wonderful things in my life just overlap in the
Mm.
way that it does.
Because really, when you work at a yarn store, you are kind of a social worker for these people. I
Oh
mean,
my
it's
God,
it's not without its
girl.
own trials and learning
Oh
the
my God.
psyche of people.
You are not kidding. The struggle is real.
Because we take it so seriously. And, for a lot of people, they forgot that this was like a hobby. We don't have to do this. It's a choice, but it's fun. And
It
when you
is.
remember it's fun, it really turns into magic.
I have a friend who's like, oh, teach me. I'm trying to learn. And she's having a hard time just accepting the process.
Mm. She's not perfect right away, and this is an issue.
Right,
Uh huh.
exactly. What is
Yeah.
that?
Oh, it's societal.
It is. It
Yeah.
is. And I'm so glad that I did not let that stop me. I'm so
Good.
glad that I did not get hung up on that because if I had, I would have just put it away and never done it again.
Yeah. I think that's why a lot of people cast on a scarf as their first project, which also the worst first project in history. It's boring and
Yeah,
it's too long.
that's so
Uh,
funny. We used to do hats as first projects.
Way better. So much more
Yes.
wearable. Way better.
Yes.
Yes. In my experience, I don't know if you found this, men picked up the knitting quicker.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
God
Absolutely.
forbid they were
That
with their
is true.
significant other, the woman would be pissed.
So fun. That's hilarious.
I don't know why, like the mechanical brain or whatever, slightly different perspectives or
Yes,
something.
yes,
Or
yes.
like as
That's
women, we feel like we cannot have the weakness of not knowing. And
right.
now this guy who didn't even want to be here, who I had to drag here, he's doing it
Exactly.
perfect. I hate him now.
I know. I think we as women, and I know I can speak for myself when I say this, have this tendency to overthink. And
What do
I
you mean by
think
that?
that's true, right? Yeah, but I'm guilty, and I find that as women, we tend to overthink in a way that men don't.
Yes. They just do.
Exactly. I think you put like needles and yarn in a man's hand, and they're worried about what is exactly in front of them in a way where women are like, well, what's happening here? And what is going on? And what am I doing? What is my end game? What is this? What is that?
Mm-hmm.
Thank God my desire to do it overrode that.
I also was like, I need to get this thing. I don't care. Like, I'll keep asking questions. This is a flaw I don't have. Like, I will just annoy you
Exactly.
until I get it right. But not everyone is like
Exactly.
that because they don't want to, come off as seeming weak or annoying
Right.
or
Right.
whatever.
I'm always fascinated by people are like, I was taught when I was a little kid, when I was 6, I learned and blah, 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 blah. All the stories are valid in their own right. I didn't come to it until much later, and it served, I think, a very different purpose for me and
Yeah.
only evolved into, well, now I'm making things. Now I can make a sweater, make leggings, I can do socks.
Yeah, children have more of the man mindset at that point because they don't care
Yes.
about the outcome. They're more excited about like the experience of learning from the
Right.
person and having
Exactly.
that. They don't
Exactly.
know what it's supposed to be anyway, so they're not, concerned about what the
Exactly.
outcome is. They have like the
Exactly.
nastiest little piece of fabric in the end and they're like, "Look at what I made." And you're
Right.
like, "Yes."
Exactly. Exactly. This is beautifully gnarly.
Another reminder for us all to embrace the playfulness and not take it so seriously, give ourselves some grace in learning. And remember,
Absolutely.
like I always say, perfection is subjective. What my idea of perfect and your idea, Kim, of perfect is, I can guarantee, are two different things.
Exactly. And that's the thing. And also just understanding that it's all a process.
Practice makes progress, not perfect.
Exactly. I love doing my podcast. I love my knitting. I love when the Fiber Festival comes and we're getting ready to pull that together. And I think it's also been very helpful for me in the sense because like I'll get asked like, "Oh my God, does it ever get to be so much? Do you ever get overwhelmed?" And I really don't because I do take care of myself. And I find that my knitting, my crafting, my crocheting is what I do
Just for you.
just for me. And it was interesting when, I was visiting my daughter in Ohio and she's like, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I'm like, "I want to go to a yarn shop."
Of course you do. Where's the local yarn store around here,
Exactly.
huh?
So she took me to a yarn shop and I, picked out something and she's like, "Oh, what are you going to make?" And I'm like, "I don't know, but I will
Something.
figure that out."
That's later Kim's problem.
Exactly.
Heck yeah.
That's a good one, Katie. I love that.
So I want to ask you, as a person
Yes.
who has a podcast all about true crime, knitters and crocheters and crafters seem to love this genre. Why do you feel like, in particular, people who craft love this topic?
Because honestly, because as somebody that was a consumer of podcasts and listen to podcasts, because you can do both. You
Of
can knit
course.
and you can listen to a podcast. And it is, again, a wonderful way to just absorb yourself in the art of storytelling while being creative. And I
Yeah.
think that we as crafters are very curious and we appreciate the art of storytelling, especially, I think, in the true crime genre, because even though it's a hard story, it's still an important story and it's still always something to be gleaned or learned. I mean, and that's even how I approach my podcast. And what I always think about when I'm telling these stories is these people that have lost their lives will not have lost their lives in vain because we will learn from them. They
Mm.
are a teacher in a way. I think it just kind of goes hand in hand because I think, like, as crafters, we're always learning. And the reason I think as crafters that we never stop learning is because we're thirsty for it. We're
Yes.
hungry for it. So everything that we come in contact with, we're hungry for it. And I think the same is true with consuming podcasts. We're hungry for that knowledge, for that education of sorts.
Mm.
I find that with every crafter that I've met, that I've come in contact with, that I've been friends with, that hunger, that knowledge, that yearning is just a part of our DNA.
Plus, if listening to someone's story like that is keeping them, in the zeitgeist, then
Yes.
really what we're doing as makers is the same. We're knitting these physical items that in many cases will be remembrances of us to the people
Absolutely.
who
Oh my
are
God,
being
girl.
gifted or you're left behind. And really, what is
Yes.
a pattern if not a short story, right?
Kate, Katie, beautifully, beautifully said. Beautifully, beautifully said.
Now it
I
all makes
am
sense.
just getting chills from that. Just, yes, because think about that.
Mm,
That's forever.
yep. Yeah.
It's a physical piece of somebody whose whole being has been in that and through that.
The time it takes to make something. And don't we all, especially again, as makers, we tend to be a little bit more sentimental to things that were
Mhm.
gifted to us, that were made
Absolutely.
by our grandma, our
Absolutely.
aunts, our friends, whatever it was, whether it's a quilt,
Absolutely.
a knitted item, a candle, like anything. We're like, oh,
Exactly.
that was, Gammy's brooch or whatever.
Thank you.
Like,
That's so true.
it's those physical reminders when we're not physically here anymore, even if it's just
Exactly.
because they live somewhere else. Like they don't even have to be gone.
Exactly. No, no. And I think that, just hearing you when you said that, it just occurred to me how we are very physical beings. We need to see, we need to touch to believe. And there's something about holding a knitting piece of somebody that you love who isn't in your physical presence
Mm,
that gives you that sense of being close to them, nonetheless.
definitely. There's lots of people whose best psychic ability is that word
Yes,
I can't remember right now, but when you hold the physical item, you can get their
yes,
essence more strongly.
yes,
So,
yes, yes.
leave a comment for the word I can't remember, please.
Right, it
Okay,
really
so
is.
another question I want to ask as makers, as storytellers, as crafters. Kim, craft for me a story outline of going on vacation as a maker and not the maker is the murderer. Craft me a story with a crafter as one of the characters.
Well, one thing as crafters, part of the vacation is centered around crafting. So I would say that a crafting tool can be one that offers great protection for anybody that tries to hurt or harm you. And I would tell a story of someone being in such a said situation and taking their needle and doing what needs to be done to get themselves time to get away.
I love it. I love
Yes,
it.
but make sure you bring the needle with you and wipe off the blood.
Yeah, maybe like a metal needle because that seems easiest to
Exactly.
clean. So, why do you think storytelling is such a magical experience? Just to wrap us up here.
Because everybody has a story. And even fiction comes from someplace. It comes from a lived experience somewhere, someplace. I think storytelling really speaks to who you are, who the person is, what made them who they are, how they move in the world is because of their stories. And that is so fascinating to me because
Yeah.
there's no shortage of stories.
And everyone loves to talk about themselves. So, it's
Oh,
pretty easy
girl,
to
that
pull it out.
is so true. As the kids say today, facts.
You're so hip, Kim.
I know. I try to be, I mean, my kid, I only know because I hear her yapping.
And well, this has been so much fun. Thank you so
It
much for
really has.
it's been so great to chat with you about all the crossovers between the podcast, the crafting, both of them living in the same space together.
Yes.
Please tell everyone where they can listen to Slaycation, where they can follow and learn more, all that good stuff.
You can find Slaycation, Slaycation, anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify. You could also find us at our website, which is slaycation.wtf. And yes, you heard that right.
Amazing.
Slaycation.wtf. WTF. You could find us on Facebook at our Slaycation page. You can join our group, Slaycators Only. We also have an Instagram, and the handle for that is Slaycation WTF. It's one word. And if you're curious about my crafting, you can find me at That Girl Knits, one word.
I'll make sure to link everything in the description so it's super easy to find.
Thank you, my friend.
If you enjoyed this episode, why don't you go ahead and subscribe to the channel? That way you can get notifications every time there's a brand new episode with more amazing guests like Kim. You can also maybe share this with a friend, especially if they're a true crime enthusiast. I sure think that they will like this one. And leave a comment because I always love hearing from you. Let us know what story Kim should discover more about in maybe a future episode of Slaycation. She loves hearing about that.
Yes, I do. Thank you so much for having me. This was an absolute blast.
Oh, yeah, it was so great. I'm so glad. Was it Nick? Reached out to
Yes,
make this
yes.
happen.
Yay,
He's
Nick.
got good instincts. Thanks, Nick. Thanks for making this
Yes.
happen. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Nick.
All right, everyone. Until next time, Merry Make. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, consider sharing it with a friend, leaving a review on iTunes or Spotify, and supporting us on Patreon to enjoy exclusive content. You can also subscribe to the Light from Lantern YouTube channel to receive a notification whenever a new episode of Knit a Spell is released. And as always, I'd love to hear your feedback on this episode, so be sure to leave a comment on YouTube or on Patreon. See you next week!